Champions League action was destined for greatness this year as we saw all the semifinalists coming back as defending champions in their own right over the course of the years. And three of the four teams were returning from last year's semifinal, with the exception of Barcelona, who found their way back into the contest after a disappointing exit in the elite round last year. You knew that no matter where this tournament was hosted, that it would be rocking and rolling like crazy. And Yerevan was a fantastic host city that found themselves with a great crowd and even better action on the court in a very unique arena that I thought had some very interesting infrastructure and was really cool to see some photos and some aerial views of along the way. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Let's get into the action for now. And let's start with that very first semifinal match, which was Palma versus Benfica, a rematch from last year as these two sides faced off in the semifinals previously. And it was an interesting question mark in a lot of ways for both teams, as there had been an exchange of players more or less unofficially. So opposing players found themselves against each other again in different colored kits. But also, you see Palma dealing with 2 injuries and a suspension from yellow card accumulation that brought into question who would come off the bench and who would serve as that mainstay for this game and cover those gaps in the roster. But this game did not disappoint. It was high energy, high octane, and was pure action the whole way through. Palma found themselves down early in their attempt to defend their championship as Lucio Rocha Jr., who is only 19 years old, by the way, finds his first of a record number of goals in a semifinal in the current format. He put the Benfica side ahead about halfway through the, just under halfway through the first half. As we got to the end of the half, Palma found themselves on top, though, with a quick spring of energy that saw them get 2 quick goals before the half. Then Benfica would find themselves again in trouble as Luan Miller, who actually is a local hero as he is from Armenia, the host country, and found himself with a lot of fans in the arena, blasts an absolute banger into the back of the net in a back and forth contest that continued through the second half. Benfica then again having to find themselves ahead, but they would score twice more, looking to hopefully break a 14-year streak of not making it to the final. They have been so close so many times, always the bridesmaid, not the bride, in the last decade and a half. And so surely, after going up 2 goals, they thought that they had this thing in the bag and would be making their first finals appearance in 14 years. But Palma had other plans, and they equalized in the final 3 minutes. 2 quick goals as time came to an end, and extra time proved to not be enough to break that deadlock, as those 2 teams fought absolutely tooth and nail against each other to find a way through this contest. But at the end of the day, it was the Palma team captain and shot stopper Carlos Barón, who was the hero during penalty kicks to make a critical save that saw Palma make it through to the finals to defend their title once again. And Benfica once again finds themselves in a 3rd place match this year. Interesting that we just can't quite seem to catch Benfica coming over the line. They've been so close in a lot of different contests. They're always in the running. They're a very formidable foe, but they just couldn't quite figure it out. But with the young talent on this team, you got to believe that their future is very, very bright, especially with the likes of Rocha Jr., who just shows all kinds of upside for this Benfica side. Enough gushing over those guys. Let's talk about the Barcelona match, and they faced Sporting. They had a absolute high bar to meet in their match after a thriller in the first match, but they came prepared to deliver. We saw Sporting take a goal lead right off the rip. In the 9th minute, Barcelona suddenly catching fire, and they score 2 in a matter of 30 seconds to get up 2-1. And after some clever play and some close calls with some PKs and some hit crossbars, we find ourselves in a 3-3 draw later in the match, and the intensity just continuing to ratchet up as we go along in this match. After some back and forth in the affair, Barcelona ultimately gets ahead, and they see through a 5-4 victory. Sporting missing the final for the first time since 2020 with that loss, and they find themselves against countrymen Benfica in a 3rd place match later in the weekend. And Barcelona finds themselves with recently returning Ferral back in the final and flying high. This was a very strong looking side in that semifinal, and it set up the two Spanish Titans to take it all for the final. Who would bring home the trophy back to Spain? Whose plane would it be on? Well, let's find out. We look ahead to this match, and man, oh man, it was an interesting one. Palma was strong throughout the entire match. Their display through this entire weekend was absolutely inspiring. They are clearly the champions of Europe for a reason. And even with their high level of play and even with their intensity and their strength in play, Barcelona was actually the one to find the goal first and get ahead 1-0, but it wasn't meant to last. With 2 minutes left in the half, Palma would level the scoring, but not only that, Luan would block two 10-meter PKs over the period of that time and ultimately lead a counterattack in the final moments of that half that would lead to a goal in the last 7 seconds right before halftime, which would see Barcelona down going into that second half. Coming back to the second half, Barcelona had no choice but to throw everything they had at the wall and see what would stick, and they put forth an absolute onslaught of pressure on Palma. Palma, of course, returning the favor along the way. Ultimately, what would happen is we'd see ourselves with a red card against Barcelona that would soften their defensive strength a little bit, and Palma would capitalize to make it 3-1. And from there on out, picking off some opportunities as Barca tried to fly the keeper to bring back that scoreline, and Palma won a convincing 5-1 to remain champions. The first time that we've seen back-to-back UEFA Futsal champions since Inter Movistar did it back in the 2016-2017 campaigns. And so they match history. They tie history with Inter Movistar. And that's not the only history that we got to see over the course of this tournament. There was a lot of highlights from this. There were a lot of new records set. Take a look at Sporting Lisbon as well as Barcelona. Both teams becoming the first to ever show in 10 total appearances in this Champions League contest. That's across all variations of it, but over the years. But they find themselves etching themselves in the history books as frequent flyers to this semifinal and solidifying their history as some of the best teams in the continent. Not only that, Palma, very interesting here. When you think about their history, last year they debuted in Champions League action. So put that into perspective. They are undefeated in Europe over the course of 2 years. That is 16 total wins. They have not lost and ties. They have not lost a single match over the course of 2 years on the Champions League stage, and they continue to fly high. Not only that, we take a look at Benfica. Now, again, I mentioned that 14-year skid where they have not made it into the final, but they are now the most decorated third-place team in history as they collected a fourth bronze medal in the second match of the day, where they faced their bitter rivals Sporting and found themselves with a bronze victory in a 6-3 encounter. And Rocha Jr. finds himself with a hat trick during that match, which gives him 5 total on the weekend, which is the most goals ever scored during a semifinal weekend of the tournament. Only exception to that being when it was an 8-team format prior to this 4-team format for the finals. So Rocha, at only 19 years old, etches his name into the history books as a top scorer in the semifinal and final. We're going to see a ton of this kid moving forward. I am so excited to see youthful talent coming up through the ranks. We've got to watch Ziki Tay come up behind the likes of Ricardinho and now make a name for himself as well. I think it's really exciting stuff to see these young talents continue to be potentially future legends for our kids to admire in the game of futsal, which is really, really cool. Add Rocha Jr. to that list. You have to. You absolutely have to acknowledge him. And the other thing, too, is we take a look at this two Spanish side final. Spain has 13 different clubs over the history of the Champions League that have brought home titles over its 23 iterations. So they are definitely the dominant dogs out of that LNFS / current role that they see with their FA controlling their futsal league, and they are absolutely dominating over the course of history. But tons of good competition coming in a lot of different ways that are constantly biting at the heels of those Spanish clubs. They still edge out on total number of victories that have been brought home to Spain, total number of trophies that have come home to the beautiful country of Spain. So this is really cool stuff to see from them. And then finally, I want to address some things, and that is, of course, the crowd and the location of this tournament. When they first announced that Armenia would be the hosts, we saw a little bit of backlash and a lot of confusion on social media from folks, including myself. I thought it was extremely bizarre, especially in a sport that deals with funding issues in a lot of different ways, even in these top leagues, and take them all out of a very compact area of Europe, being the Portuguese and Spanish countries being side by side, and then sending them all the way across the continent to Armenia. But man, the fans showed up and said, hey, we're not afraid of the travel, and you have fans everywhere in this continent. Lua Miller, of course, being a local hero, saw a lot of Palma jerseys in the crowd, and recorded numbers from UEFA's website state that we saw 4,600 people there in the arena for the semifinal matches, and we saw 5,000 people show up for the final itself, which I think is very interesting and a very healthy crowd. I did see a couple tweets, and I can't remember the name of the account, but I remember seeing a tweet or two criticizing the size of the crowd. But as I watched, I thought it was a pretty loud audience and a very interesting crowd to see. And of course, you know me, guys, I'm always looking at the live stream count. But with the UEFA Champions League, I did not really, with it being on UEFA TV, I really didn't take a look at that in this particular case. But my understanding, it was a very strong viewing. And I think that the crowd of Europe really showed up and proved that they have a love and desire for futsal, which is really, really cool. I absolutely love to see it. And it helps encourage me to dream of what could be in other parts of the world for this sport. What do you guys think about the Champions League? I know it's been a little while. Maybe you aren't thinking through some things that maybe were fresh in your mind a month ago. Again, I apologize for the delay on this video, but had to share, had to highlight, and congratulations again to Palma on their victory. Tell me what you guys thought about the format and the games themselves and everything we talked about on the video. Or maybe you thought of something I didn't think about to talk about in this video that you find important. Sound off in those comments below. Let me know what you think. And until I see you there, don't forget, play with your soul.